Welcome, traveller, to medieval night tales. I am the Monk of Blackthorn Abbey, keeper of forgotten chronicles, haunted legends, and candlelit mysteries buried beneath the stones of the old world. Tonight's tale is called The Bell That Rang at Midnight, a dark legend whispered through the halls of Blackthorn Abbey for centuries. So dim your candles, settle beside the fire, and journey with me into the storm. And before we begin, if these tales bring you peace beneath the night sky, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, leave a like, and share this channel with fellow travelers of the dark and ancient world. Now, let the chronicle begin. The rain had not ceased for 3 days. It drifted endlessly across the northern hills, like a grey veil pulled over the world itself, softening the forests, drowning the roads, and turning every narrow path into black rivers of mud. Even now, as midnight approached, the storm whispered against the stained glass windows of Blackthorn Abbey with cold and patient fingers. Inside the Abbey library, only a single candle remained lit. Its weary flame trembled upon a heavy oak desk where an old monk sat, wrapped in dark wool robes, his weathered hands resting upon the pages of a crumbling manuscript. Around him stood towering shelves filled with forgotten chronicles, saintly writings, and ancient maps curled by centuries of damp air. The monk lifted his eyes slowly toward the fire. "You have arrived at a troubled hour, traveller," he said softly. His voice was calm, the sort of voice one hears beside dying embers and distant thunder. Few now dare walk the old northern road after sunset, especially during the month of hollow rain. Outside, somewhere far beyond the monastery walls, a bell echoed faintly through the storm. One, then silence. The monk lowered his gaze once more. "In my younger years," he continued, "before these halls had fallen silent, there came to Blackthorn Abbey a messenger from the southern kingdoms. He arrived upon a black horse shortly after midnight, soaked by rain and trembling with exhaustion. The fire crackled gently. He carried no banner, no royal seal, and yet every brother within these walls knew at once that something terrible had crossed the mountains with him. Another gust of wind swept through the abbey chimneys. The candle flame bent low, for the messenger brought news of a bell. The monk paused. A bell that had begun to ring in the dead of night, though no living hand ever touched the rope. The messenger was led into the abbey just before the great doors were barred against the storm. Brother Matthias, who still possessed sharper hearing than the younger monks, claimed he heard the horse collapse outside moments after the rider dismounted. By morning, the poor creature had frozen where it lay beneath the rain, but the rider himself endured, barely. The monks removed his soaked cloak beside the fire hall and found beneath it a man no older than 30, though hardship had carved deep shadows beneath his eyes. His hands trembled violently as he drank warm broth from a wooden bowl, and several times he turned toward the windows as if expecting someone or something to be standing beyond the glass. The old monk in the library sighed softly before continuing. In those days, Blackthorn Abbey still offered sanctuary to travelers, he said. Kings trusted our silence, villagers trusted our prayers, and frightened men arrived more often than you might imagine. Rain drifted against the abbey roof in steady rhythm. The messenger refused to speak before the others, the monk said. He demanded to see only the abbot himself. So, near the second hour after midnight, the rider was taken through narrow stone corridors, lit only by candlelight, to the private chamber of Abbot Severin, the oldest man then living within Blackthorn Abbey. It was said the abbot had not left those chambers in nearly 7 winters, and yet, on hearing the traveller's name, he ordered the doors opened at once. The monk's fingers brushed gently across the manuscript pages before him. What passed between them that night, he whispered, was never written in any official record. The fire snapped quietly. But before dawn came, every bell rope inside the abbey had been cut from the towers. By sunrise, whispers had spread through every corridor of Blackthorn Abbey. Young novices spoke in frightened murmurs while carrying water through the cloisters. Elder monks abandoned their morning readings to gather beneath the archways of the chapel, glancing uneasily toward the bell tower that rose above the monastery like a dark stone finger against the clouds. For the first time in living memory, the abbey bells did not ring at dawn. The old monk folded his hands slowly. You must understand, he said. The bells governed all life within these walls. They summoned prayer, marked the passing hours, warned of fire, death, or invasion. Without them, the abbey felt strangely hollow, as though time itself had stopped breathing. Outside, the rain continued its endless descent upon the hills. Brother Cedric, keeper of the tower keys, was the first to discover what the abbot had ordered during the night. Every rope hanging within the bell chamber had been severed cleanly near the beams above, not frayed, not broken, cut. And according to Cedric's frightened account, the fibre still smelled faintly of smoke. The monk beside the fire lowered his voice. Some believed the messenger carried news of war, he murmured. Others feared plague had crossed the southern kingdoms once more. But Abbot Severin spoke to no one. The old man had sealed himself inside his private chamber before sunrise, refusing food, refusing prayer, refusing even the company of his closest brothers. Only the messenger remained with him. Together they stayed hidden behind locked oak doors while unease spread through the abbey like winter frost creeping across stone. Then, on the 3rd night after the rider's arrival, the monk glanced slowly toward the dark windows of the library. Though every bell rope in Blackthorn Abbey had been cut away, the great northern bell rang once beneath the midnight storm. The sound awakened every soul within Blackthorn Abbey, not loudly, not violently, but with a deep and hollow tone that drifted through the storm like something ancient calling from beneath the earth itself. One bell, only one. Yet its echo seemed to linger endlessly through the stone corridors and candlelit chambers of the monastery. Several younger monks later claimed the sound had not reached their ears alone, but their bones. The old monk stared quietly into the fire before speaking again. Brother Elias, he says softly, was the first to leave his chamber. Elias had been among the youngest in the abbey then, scarcely 18 winters old, and still fearful of the dark passages beneath the monastery. Nevertheless, he carried a lantern through the eastern corridor toward the chapel, believing perhaps some forgotten rope had remained within the tower. But as he crossed the central courtyard, he froze. The rain had stopped, not gradually, not naturally. One moment, the storm had battered the abbey roofs without mercy, and the next, the world stood utterly still. No wind, no rain, no movement among the trees beyond the walls, only silence. The monk's fingers tightened faintly around the edge of the manuscript. Elias later swore, he whispered, that he could hear breathing in the courtyard beside him, though no figure stood there. The lantern shook in the young monk's trembling hand as he turned toward the bell tower, looming above the abbey roofs, and there, high within the darkness near the belfry windows, he saw a faint yellow light moving slowly behind the stone arches, not candlelight, not lantern fire, something dimmer, older, as though someone carried a dying flame through the tower itself. The old monk lowered his voice almost to a whisper, but Brother Cedric still possessed the only tower key. And Cedric, that night, was asleep beside 3 witnesses in the western dormitory. The ringing of the northern bell changed Blackthorn Abbey, though dawn eventually came, pale and cold beyond the rain-covered hills. No warmth returned to the monastery halls. Conversations fell silent. Whenever footsteps approached, candles burned longer than usual in the chapel. Even the oldest monks avoided looking towards a bell tower. And still, Abbot Severin refused to explain what the messenger had brought from the south. The old monk, beside the fire, turned another fragile page of the manuscript. "In all my years within the abbey," he said softly, "I had never seen the brothers so afraid of silence, for it was not merely the ringing that troubled them, it was what followed afterward. No birds gathered upon the monastery roofs at morning. The great iron weather vane above the chapel had stopped turning, despite the wind. And several brothers swore they heard footsteps wandering the upper corridors long after midnight prayers had ended, footsteps belonging to no one." The fire crackled gently. Late that evening, Brother Elias was summoned to the private chamber of Abbot Severin. The young monk entered nervously, carrying fresh candles through narrow corridors, lit by weak amber light. Inside the chamber, the air smelled of smoke and melted wax. The messenger sat silently near the fireplace, his exhausted face half hidden beneath shadow. But it was the abbot himself who disturbed Elias most. Severin appeared older now, much older. His hands trembled as he studied several ancient manuscripts spread across the desk before him. Then, without warning, the old abbot asked Elias a strange question. "Tell me," Severin whispered, "have you ever heard whispered, Fla?" Before he could answer, a sudden sound echoed somewhere deep below the monastery, a low metallic groan, as though something ancient had awakened beneath Blackthorn Abbey. No monk slept after the ringing of the northern bell. Candles burned through the remainder of the night as frightened brothers gathered within the chapel, speaking prayers beneath their breath, while cold wind moaned through the ancient rafters overhead. Some claimed the sound had come from the tower itself. Others swore it had echoed from beneath the earth. But all agreed upon one terrible truth: no man could have rung the bell. The ropes had been cut. The old monk stared quietly into the fire before continuing. By morning, he said, fear had entered Blackthorn Abbey like a sickness. Even the abbey dogs refused to approach the northern courtyard. They growled softly at the tower above and hid themselves beneath wagons whenever the wind shifted through the cloisters. Shortly after dawn, Abbot Severin finally emerged from his chamber. The brothers scarcely recognized him. Only days before, the old abbot had walked slowly, yet proudly, through the monastery halls, leaning upon his carved wooden staff with calm dignity. But now his face appeared pale as candle wax, and deep shadows hung beneath his eyes, as though he had not slept in many nights. Behind him stood the southern messenger, silent and watchful. Without offering explanation, the abbot gathered 6 monks and ordered them to accompany him to the bell tower at once. Rainwater dripped steadily from the stone roofs as they crossed the courtyard. No birds sang, no bells rang, only the sound of boots against wet stone disturbed the heavy silence. Brother Cedric unlocked the tower door with trembling hands. The hinges groaned open. A cold breath of air drifted down from the darkness above. The staircase within twisted upward into shadows untouched by daylight, narrow and ancient, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. One by one, the monks climbed. The old monk paused. When they reached the bell chamber, he whispered, they found the severed ropes exactly where they had fallen 3 nights earlier. Nothing had moved, nothing had changed, and yet, high above them, the great northern bell still swayed gently from side to side. The great northern bell continued its slow movement above the monks' heads, back and forth, not enough to ring again, yet enough to silence every man within the tower chamber. Even Abbot Severin stood frozen beneath it, his pale hands tightening around his wooden staff, while cold wind drifted through the narrow stone arches of the belfry. The old monk beside the fire spoke softly. Brother Elias was the first to notice the mark. At first, the young monk believed the dark stain upon the bell's surface to be rainwater. But as he raised his lantern higher, the light revealed something stranger. Words, or what had once been words. Ancient symbols had been scratched into the black metal long ago, almost hidden beneath age and corrosion. Most were impossible to read, except for one, a single carving near the lower rim. The monk paused briefly before continuing. The old language of the northern kingdoms is rarely spoken now, he said, yet Abbot Severin recognized the symbol immediately. and upon seeing it, the abbot's expression changed. To fear, not confusion, not surprise, fear. The messenger from the south stepped closer, then staring upward at the carving with hollow eyes. "It is the same," he whispered. No brother asked what he meant. For at that very moment, Brother Cedric discovered something lying beneath the bell itself. A small piece of rope, freshly cut. The fibers still smelled faintly of smoke, yet no rope remained attached to the bell above. The wind outside grew louder, rattling the narrow tower windows as thunder rolled across the distant hills. Then Brother Elias noticed one final thing. The floor beneath the bell was wet, not with rainwater, but with long black footprints leading toward the staircase, descending into the abbey below. And though the stone around them remained cold, the footprints were still warm. The passage beneath the bell tower had remained sealed for longer than any monk could remember. Its iron gate stood hidden behind old prayer shells, deep within the lower crypts, where dust covered the stones like grey snowfall, and the air smelled of wax, damp earth, and forgotten centuries. Only Abbot Severin possessed the key, and on that evening, as thunder rolled beyond the monastery walls once more, the old abbot finally chose to open it. The monk, beside the fire, turned another brittle page of the manuscript. Not all places beneath Blackthorn Abbey were built for prayer, he said quietly. The narrow stairway beyond the gate spiraled deep beneath monastery foundations. The monks descended slowly with candles and lanterns, their footsteps echoing endlessly through the darkness below. Brother Elias walked near the rear of the group. He later wrote that the air grew colder with every step downward. Not the ordinary chill of underground stone, but a deeper cold. A stillness untouched by sunlight. At last the stairway opened into a vast chamber, supported by ancient pillars blackened with age. Strange symbols had been carved into the floor, nearly worn away by time, while rusted chains hung motionless from the walls. No monk spoke. Even the messenger from the south appeared shaken. Then Elias noticed something that caused his blood to turn cold. At the center of the chamber stood another bell, smaller than the great northern bell above the abbey, but forged from the same dark metal. The old monk's voice lowered to nearly a whisper. It was said the first brothers of Blackthorn Abbey had buried that bell centuries earlier, he murmured, for they believed its sound carried farther than the mortal world was meant to hear. The candle flames flickered violently. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the pillars, a second bell answered, soft, distant, but unmistakable. And though no wind stirred beneath the earth, the buried bell before them began to move slowly on its own. For several long moments, no man within the chamber dared to breathe. The buried bell swayed gently in the darkness beneath Blackthorn Abbey, its ancient metal groaning softly with each movement. Dust drifted from the ceiling above, while candle flames flickered wildly in trembling hands. Yet no one stood near the bell. No rope touched it. No chain moved. Still, it continued its slow and unnatural motion. The old monk lowered his eyes toward the manuscript before him. Brother Elias later wrote, he whispered, that the chamber itself seemed to listen, Far above them, thunder rolled faintly across the hills. Then second ringing came, not loud, not violent, but deep, a hollow sound that passed through the underground crypt, like distant morning carried upon winter wind. One of the younger monks collapsed at his knees at once, clutching his prayer beads and muttering desperate scripture beneath his breath. Another fled toward the staircase before Abbot Severin commanded him to stop, but the old abbot himself appeared more frightened than any of them. The monk by the fire sighed softly, for Abbot Severin had heard that bell once before. The southern messenger finally stepped forward then, his pale face illuminated by lantern light. With trembling hands he removed a folded parchment from inside his cloak and offered it to the abbot without a word. The seal upon the letter had already been broken. Its edges were blackened, as though touched by flame. Slowly, Severin opened it, and as his tired eyes moved across the page, the color drained from his face entirely. He told the brothers, the monk continued quietly, that a monastery in the southern kingdoms had vanished 3 weeks earlier. No survivors, no bodies, only silence. And within the abandoned chapel, investigators had discovered a single object resting before the altar, a bell forged from the same dark metal as the one now moving beneath Blackthorn Abbey. The fire crackled softly in the library. Outside, rain whispered once more against the windows. Then the old monk looked toward the shadows beyond the candlelight. And that, he said carefully, was when the footsteps began above them. At first, the sound was faint, so faint that several monks believed it to be nothing more than rainwater moving through the ancient walls above them. But then it came again, slow, measured. Footsteps. The old monk's candle flickered gently as he spoke. Someone, he whispered, was walking through Blackthorn Abbey. The brothers beneath the crypt ceiling turned upward in silence. Far above them, somewhere beyond layers of stone and darkness, the footsteps continued across monastery floors. Not hurried, not wandering, deliberate, as though whoever walked the abbey already knew every corridor by heart. Brother Elias felt the blood drain from his face, for all monks had descended together into the underground chamber. No one remained above. The buried bell creaked softly behind them. One of the younger brothers began weeping quietly into his hands, while Abbot Severin stared toward the staircase with hollow eyes. Then came another sound, a door opening, heavy oak hinges groaning somewhere high above the crypts. The southern messenger stepped backward at once. He heard it before, the old monk said. In the southern monastery that vanished, the footsteps continued, crossing the abbey slowly, passing through halls empty of life, then stopping directly overhead. Dust drifted from the ceiling stones. No one moved, no one breathed, and from somewhere above the chamber, 3 slow knocks echoed through the floor. Knock, knock, knock. The candle flames dimmed violently. Brother Elias later swore that the buried bell answered the knocks, with movement of its own, swaying harder now upon its ancient stand, though no hand touched it. Abbot Severin finally spoke then. Only 4 words. The monk's voice became almost inaudible. "Do not answer it." Outside the library windows, distant thunder rolled once more across the northern hills. The old monk slowly closed the manuscript before him. Its cracked leather cover released a small cloud of dust into the candlelight. "For what walks the halls of Blackthorn Abbey that night," he murmured softly, "had once worn the robes of a monk.